You are recording, Catherine. I see record.
Yes, but no, that's Maddie's otter notes taking thing.
Ah.
Okay, sorry if I sound disparaging, but I hate AI. I'm too old for it, frankly.
Join the club. Join the club.
I love it.
Well, I'm too
I
old.
love it as well.
I'm too old for it. No, that wrong one. Is that the wrong one?
So if we start with, we'll
Yeah,
start with
that's
this
it.
one.
Right. Okay, we're recording.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So a bit about me. I work in town planning. When I found out about my dyslexia in 2015, I started by trying to find ways to advocate for myself. Then I became a neurodiversity network lead in my workplace. And in my day-to-day job, I manage a team of 7 people. So leadership is really important, I find, to me, myself, and also to everyone that's in my team. I try to be inclusive, but I'm learning all the time. And I've learnt loads from this advocacy group because of the way that we all support each other. And it feels like we're open to ask questions, to be vulnerable, and to learn from each other. And it's that kind of culture that I try and establish in my teams. So the slides today, on the next slide, Catherine, set up the presentation in 3 parts. So I'll start to talk a little bit about leadership for neurodiversity and the idea of intersectionality. Then I'll talk about these terms that are sometimes called EDI, and that's diversity, equality, and inclusion. And then I'll talk about organisational culture and values as well. But it's an open discussion because I really want to hear from the group. So the next slide, Catherine. This is a quote about intersectionality. So when we have leadership with intersectionality in our minds, the organisation Diversity and Ability have called this a new powerful approach to leadership that embraces the unique background, experiences, thoughts and perspectives of every individual. Intersectionality provides us with a lens to understand the identities and marginalization that we experience is a complex and multifaceted thing. So there's many layers to this. And I wondered if anyone needs us to say a little bit more about intersectionality, or if there's anyone on the call that wants to describe what intersectionality means to them.
I don't mind if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this was actually on the MA in Autism course. We talked about intersectionality in terms of someone's disability status, their gender, and also sexual orientation as well. So in here, this could be kind of quite multifaceted in terms of someone, for example, I've got a few friends on network on an autism network that are also LGBT. So they could have been discriminated because of their autism or because of their sexual orientation. And in terms of how people are, in terms of whether they live in a deprived area or whether they live in a working class area, things like that. And it's
That's
looking at
really
the person
good.
as a whole.
Thank you.
And yeah,
Is it
Rose is
all right
right.
if I
In terms of
take
the
us through a
editing,
few
yeah.
slides? But that's spot on. I think that really captures it. It's just the different layers and different parts of people's identity, and it's different for everybody, and so it gives a different experience for every person. So thank you for that. That's really helpful. And it's only, I'll just whip through the next slides because of time, but then we'll have a bit of a breakout session as well. So leadership is all about organisational cultures and values. Catherine, if we move to the next slide, it's really important that we think about intersectionality when we think about what leaders do. So the leaders or the managers are the people that hire the employees that they work with. They set the tone for the whole team, and they can affect the team morale and its well-being. So the leaders will provide direction and resources. They can also help every individual to succeed, to grow, and to develop. And leaders can, if they choose to, they can show appreciation and support. And it can have a massive impact to everyone that they influence. And leaders are the people that translate the purpose and the values of the organization and then personalize them for their team. So I thought I'd move to the next slide, but this is really talking about how leaders are influencers. And this, as we go on, this doesn't have to just be the one person that's the nominated lead for the team. Every single person in the team can have an influence and be a leader on the others that they're working with. So with leadership and values, we've said that leaders translate the purpose and the values of the organization to the team. They can also ensure that the organization values, ideas, and policies are shared and understood by everyone. That there needs to be a culture where people are able to ask questions and really understand what that means for them. So some of the values which have been identified as essential to leadership are things like purpose. Does everyone know why they're there and what they're there to do? Opportunity, so what's possible within the team. Success, what means a good result for the team, and is that the same for every single person? Do they share in their idea of what success is, or are all the different people working to a different idea of success? Appreciation, so we've said that leaders can show appreciation and support, but what does that look like to different people? The different support that one person might need might come across as too much or too controlling for another person. So it's really important that it's a two-way conversation, and it's just not one person imposing their ideas on someone else. And then the last thing we've got here that leadership can do if it's based on values is to think about well-being. So that could be health and safety, that could be mental well-being, it could be stress. And increasingly it's understood that well-being has a massive impact on the team. And so if it's not seen as a priority value, it can be hidden and people aren't being open about themselves. So I'll go through a few more slides before we break out and have a discussion. If we go to the next slide, Catherine, this is a slide about fairness, and I thought I'd put it up early in the presentation, but then welcome people to come back at the end and ask if we have a different idea of fairness. So I'll ask a question, and then maybe a couple of people could talk for a couple of minutes about what their ideas of fairness are. But the question that I've asked in terms of fairness is, how can we ensure that individuals or groups of individuals are not treated less favourably because of their protected characteristics? That's how legally we might be looking at what fairness means. But I thought I'd open it up to people to discuss fairness in a different way. So has anyone got an example of where they've felt about fairness in a team? Sorry, I can't see if anyone's got their hands up. So maybe if anyone wants to come in and talk, but what I'll do is I'll talk about these pictures for a while, because fairness can mean a different thing to different people. So in the first slide, everyone's been given the same thing. They've been given the same boxes to stand on. And the idea could be, well, we've given everyone fair treatment, and so we've done the right thing. In the middle slide, what we've done is we've given different amounts of support to the different people that are shown in the middle image. And that means that everyone can participate in the sports game. It's a very American image that we've got here. So fairness there means ensuring everyone can participate and they're not excluded by adapting the way that we support different people. And then in the last one, there's a design solution that means that there isn't a need for each person to have different treatment because everyone can see the game. So I can go through to the next slide unless anyone wants to chip in. So the next slide is about these three terms: equality, diversity and inclusion. But did anyone want to step in and say anything? No. Okay, we'll keep going.
Hold on. I mean, does anybody want to make comment on fairness? You know, the concept of fairness.
I think maybe it's D. I don't know if I can put this correctly, but I mean, sometimes it's a case of people need things like the middle picture. They need what is going to help them in their specific situation. And then sometimes it's a case of if you just make it accessible to everybody, then nobody feels that they're being singled out and it's just fair for everybody. Is that yeah,
I think that's it. And it's not the same thing every time, but also I wonder if everyone feels the same. I think with neurodiversity, people can really take fairness to heart. So I've had experiences at work where it stayed in my mind for years afterwards when I've thought about someone said something or they've acted in a way that was unfair, and it just it really seems wrong. And I think as a group we're really encouraged to advocate and speak up, but it's not always easy to say something about fairness at the time.
I think what Dee said is really important, that there's a word here, singled, two words, singled out.
Yeah.
I think that's what people worry about.
I worked in an organisation where didn't matter how much the clients liked one as an individual and was happy with results, there was always a core group of people who took the jobs and were given the jobs, no matter how good the results were but the key jobs would mostly be given to this core group of people. Basically all the blokes.
There was an inner circle.
The white blokes is the truth. Yeah. And I eventually left. I couldn't cope with it anymore.
Yeah. So we'll get into these ideas of equality or diversity, equality and inclusion. And I've put the sort of definitions up here, but then I go through each one in turn. And again, it's just understanding that this means different things to different people. It's a really broad conversation, and intersectionality is really important throughout. So these are just the sort of some of the definitions, if you like. So diversity is many different types of things or people being included in something, or a range of different things or people. We'll come back to this in a minute. And equality is about, it can be about having the same status, the same rights, or the same opportunities. And there's a legal framework, the Equality Act. And then inclusion, to make someone feel part of the whole, so people feel valued, supported, and considered. But inclusion also means feeling safe and being able to be authentic, not have to hide parts of themselves. And in workplaces, there's often a drive for DEI, which is diversity, equality, and inclusion, saying that all three things matter. But it's more than just words. So Catherine, if we go to the next slide, I've started with diversity, and I thought I'd use this slide that we've talked about previously about neurodiversity and thinking about how we do things like selection or exams, but also saying that the Equality Act identifies 9 protected characteristics, which are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex and sexual orientation. But diversity is so much broader than that. And even that list doesn't identify neurodiversity on its own. It's picked up through disability. But that means that in order to benefit from some of the adjustments, reasonable adjustments and protections in law, to have your diversity recognised, you sometimes have to call it disability. And for some people, that's really, really difficult, and it doesn't feel comfortable to talk about disability. So I think there's a real need to make sure that when we're thinking about diversity, we're thinking about the intersectionality that we talked about at the beginning, and also that it's much broader than sort of strict legal position at work. Catherine, do stop me and we can dwell on anything as we go, but otherwise I was thinking we could go through to the next one.
Okay, unless anybody's got any comment or observation.
Just to add to that, in terms of disability, obviously the mental health component of disability was only formally implemented back in 2012. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in, because I remember when I worked at BPP back, 2012 to 2015. So if someone has had like a temporary like mental illness or anxiety and depression, because that is not necessarily as spoken as much about compared to dyslexia or dyspraxia, for example.
It's an interesting thing that you're talking about, Andrew, because actually Nancy Doyle, who's going to be our next speaker, is campaigning to have mental health as part of the the spectrum of neurodivergent conditions. But the fact is that neurodivergent conditions are lifelong. Mental health might not be. It's not a lifelong disability. It could be, but it might not be.
With things like bipolar, that tends. I had a student who I worked with for several years, and he's heavily medicated. But I've met another one that once they got the right support, so she has a dog and she's got good support network. She's not relying on medication, so her impact is different. But I agree, others, yeah, it's quite an interesting debate. I met her, didn't she? Isn't she an ADHD academic as well? I don't know if she had some kind of.
Nancy Doyle has ADHD. She's very ADHD. She talks very, very fast. I mean, it's quite a debate actually that's going on in the neurodivergent community at the moment, and many people think that actually mental health shouldn't be part of neurodivergent conditions, but actually it's very linked, of course, because people as they go along have these challenges. Who was that, Rose?
I was just saying you can become mentally unwell without even knowing you've got a neurodivergent condition, and that's part of why you've become mentally unwell.
Yeah.
I think they're two different things myself.
I mean, I think it's a different thing. I don't think it's part of the neurodivergent spectrum, but I do think it's extremely important to recognise it. And I think actually it's an interesting debate, because I just wonder whether mental health should be in there somewhere. In fact,
and I think it's the non-permanence of it as well. It's really important to think diversity is not fixed in a team. People go through different experiences, and mental health well-being, it can change, and so you don't just have a group of people and then you kind of know about their diversity and that's it. It's much more subtle than that.
I mean marriage and civil partnership is not something that is necessarily permanent, is it? So you can have a protected characteristic that might not be permanent.
Nor is sex, nor is age.
Yeah. So I think it's an important debate to have, actually.
And I think also there's a question people sometimes ask is who's not in the room. So if we're talking about leadership and being in a team as well, sometimes if you haven't got much diversity, then you're not thinking beyond the experience, you know, your own experience and that sort of thing. So there's loads to think about diversity as a leader that goes beyond these protected characteristics.
Yeah.
And
I-
language as well. People call things different things, so it doesn't mean there's not one right word. You know, people might be speaking two different languages, have different names for things, or one might have a different technical training background to another, but both explanations work. And so sometimes when you're in a team as well, there's a thought that there's only one way to talk about things, which can exclude people.
So I think mental health should be included because of the experiences a neurodivergent person would have, and it differs. And I think we have to concentrate on the positive side of mental health. It can go either way, but you know, there is a positive side of mental health that can be led instead of the negative.
Expand on that, Alicia. Talk about the positive side.
Yeah, like for instance, it doesn't matter your experiences. You have to speak to the person how it affects them. You can't really dictate to them and say you've got mental health, but you've got to be really specific. What is it? Let the person say, is it the negative side or is it the positive side? Then you know how to help them. If they're more on the negative side, they need a little bit more help. If they're more positive, because of their experiences, can make them look like they need help, but they just need a little helping hand. So it's a spectrum, but you have to have really good listening skills and listen to the person more, and don't expect an answer straight away because there's going to be lots of obstacles. And the person might be trying to help themselves, give them that room as well, or they need that help.
Okay, thank
you. That to me is positive because it's a win-win situation. The person's helping themselves as well as being able to ask for help when they need it. I mean, even the help that they need is only temporary. They just need to get to a certain point, and after that, it's a different story altogether.
Yes, I think we'll all agree with that, Alicia.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Yeah, if we go to the next one, but I think there is also something about sometimes you can have labels attached to things and they can be harmful. It can, when you talk about diversity or you talk about equality, sometimes it can be with sort of preconceived ideas, stereotypes, putting people into boxes. And I think it's really important, I like the way that we've talked, that people can have different identities, no two people are the same, and not making assumptions about things. But what this slide, it's a little bit like the idea of fairness. It's just talking about equality. So equality can mean equality of opportunity, and making sure that people have access and that are not disadvantaged, and that they have the same the tools that they need to have the same access and the same opportunity. So it doesn't mean treating every single person in the same situation exactly the same. But for some people, these terms equality can be a concern, because if you start talking about umbrella terms and labels for people, then it could deny the individuality. You can't just assume what somebody wants because of an umbrella term that you've given them to them. And you've got to be really careful not to conflate maybe physical characteristics with someone's background. So what is the need or the what is it that you're seeing about a person? You've got to make sure that you see them in the round and don't make judgments when you're trying to decide what is equality. So I think it's really important to think it's not about one size fits all. Is it possible to offer choice, but also not making assumptions about what that choice or what somebody would want is. And can you recognize who's being advantaged, who's being disadvantaged, who is it that is getting the access to the opportunities, and then start trying to unpick the barriers. What is it that's preventing people, by really listening as well. So that's equality. And then if we go through to inclusion, I've just tried to pick images, but I think it's about thinking about in a group setting, how does it feel when people are not involved? And sometimes also remembering that sometimes we do need safe spaces. So this group is an example of where we've created a safe space because we've got things in common. And I think we've all got a lot out of having access to that safe environment. But then also trying to keep it open and not exclusive. So when you're a leader in a team setting, you've got to think about who you're excluding, but also have people got the spaces that they need to express themselves and not have to hide parts of their identity. And some of the issues around inclusion that can be unacceptable are if inclusion suggests that the presence of diversity means you don't have to change anything. So you could have a situation where you try and open things up and you allow diversity in, but then you're saying that you have to conform to a certain way of behaving or a certain way of fitting in that suits the majority. And so if you've never been in the inner circle, sometimes you might not want to join that kind of environment. So you might not want to just be allowed in and then to join in. You might actually want to change the way that team operates. And so it's about quality of participation, not just having a seat at the table where you might just feel like you're sort of stuck in a corner. Do you actually have the chance to get involved? And also it's thinking about power and who is allowing people to come in. Is there an idea that it's sort of these are the rules of the group, and some people are allowed in and some people are not? So it's an area of it's a kind of action. You have to take action to exclude people, but you've got to think about the way that you're doing inclusion as well. So I thought this is a good area really for us to open up and talk about what inclusion means to us. Catherine, I wasn't sure if we need to do formal breakout rooms, or I thought it's quite nice because we're such a small group today to just talk over the slides.
You can just talk. So
Yeah.
shall I stop the share and we go back to the...
Yeah.
Have you got any more slides after this?
I've got a couple more slides. I mean, if it's easier to go through the slides to the end and then do a breakout, I don't mind, to save you rejoining.
What do people want to do? Do you want to talk about inclusion now or later?
It might be good to talk now, I think.
Okay, let's I must admit I do like your slides. I do like that set of slides. you've got there. I think the integration side's really good.
Mm.
So what does inclusion mean to people?
A friend of mine has said on a couple of occasions that where she works, they've done surveys and or whatever, and they like to show that they have people from different backgrounds working for them and everything. But when you kind of look and delve into the figures, they're, you know, they're the people who are from diverse backgrounds are not in higher roles. They're all kind of one level. But the organization likes to show that they are meeting the requirements of the funding providers, etc. And I think that's kind of, I don't know if, I think that to me that's kind of not real inclusion. It's not really, it's not giving people the opportunity to move up, and it's just creating, it's giving a false impression. I think that's kind of my idea of inclusion, or in exclude, well, yeah, not being inclusive enough, really.
Yes, yeah, I think there is a glass ceiling, and I think too many organisations deal with quotas. Anybody else got any thoughts?
Yes, I do. I think it's about sharing knowledge, because there is hidden knowledge and blind spots in certain cultures, because there wasn't they didn't have the right, what can I say? They got into a position by default, and now that they're there, they just need more knowledge. And inclusiveness means to me is that someone is advanced in knowledge and someone isn't. And if that can be come to balance, I think there will be growth there. So that's what I'm thinking. If that
Yeah,
makes any sense.
I think the big issue is that managers recruit people like themselves,
Yeah.
Yeah.
you know, and it's still going on.
And they're
Anybody
not open to challenge, because that's their comfortable space, I guess, is to be with people that operate in the same way. Yeah, and I think that's that thing of, you can allow a bit of diversity in, but then if you're going to stick to your rules and your way of behaving, then it can be a negative environment for that person. I think with neurodiversity, with dyslexia, definitely feel that, because it can be, well, this is how we do things, this is what's important. Yeah, and it doesn't feel good.
I
So
mean, you
is
can
there-
say that we're not inclusive because it's a bunch of neurodivergent people.
And I
And
think it's acknowledging that often a team never has everyone in the world in it. So you've always got an element of excluding people. There's voices that are not there at all times, but sometimes that safe space is really important as well.
well, you know, that I think, you know, when I first started working with this neurodivergent group for the WFDA, I'll put my hands up here and I'll say I did actually exclude neurotypical, neuronormative, neuromajority people. I actually excluded them. I said they couldn't come.
What's wrong with that?
And well, that's very excluding. That's not inclusive, is it? But the reason why I did it was because I know for a fact from a very long experience in life and in the workplace that neurodivergent people will not open up if you've got people who are looking at this in a completely different lens.
I think it really depends what that makes total sense what you just said, Catherine. But it's like you don't invite tennis players into a netball team, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good to know. So, you know, this is interesting.
Yeah, I think often it's thought about like, oh, you know, at work they talk about it like it's let's include everyone, but that's not what's happening. It's still a closed group of people, and sometimes it's right to get certain professionals together or people with a common interest together. But I think you've just got to be really conscious that's what you're doing, and not do the same thing all the time. Yeah, be open about it.
Yeah, I think you've got to be open.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
And I mean, we can get to it.
What if, say for example, if you've got people who won't go for an assessment for a neurodivergent condition, even though there's a high kind of likelihood if they were to come to such a group, like I have met people in the past who were very dismissive of the fact that they had dyslexia. I can't possibly be dyslexic. I live in this area, you know, we've got this, and I'm like, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't be dyslexic. And surprise, surprise, there were 3 of them like that when I was a disability officer at BPP who had other disabilities. And then I screened them using the LADS computer software. And then they came back with that. And sometimes people, if you don't invite people who aren't, if you invite people who aren't neurodivergent, there's the risk that people might not open up. But also the other perspective is if you don't include parents as well, so for children who may not necessarily be informed. So there are some events that Pact for Autism, which is our local autism group, they invite parents along so parents can get an education into understanding the support needs of their autistic children if they don't actually understand autism. And so sometimes you've got to do a bit of both. I think sometimes maybe if someone was interested, you know, you maybe could send them, I don't know, like a recording. But inclusion by design is something that's quite hot at the moment with technology. But are you always going to please everyone? I don't think you can, but you can try and go with what the majority wants. But how are you going to define that majority? It's opening up a whole can of worms.
I think that's a really interesting thought, Andrew. You know, inclusion by design that's interesting, because you know it could be good, it could be bad, but you know we're talking in positives here, and actually inclusion by design could be very, very good. But you know what struck me when you were talking about including the parents in the discussion about autism, which is obviously really key, is that a discussion like that, I think it's all about how it's facilitated. It's really important how it's mediated, facilitated.
You're very right there, because there's a lady called Debbie who used to run the group with her son on the spectrum, and then she left, so she retired. And since then, they've had a couple people come and go, and the workshops are very inconsistent and people are not happy. But because Debbie was living from her experience of being a mother and as an ex-teacher, and her husband is a teacher, she delivered them in such a way that everyone would go. She had to kind of find space to kind of get, but since she left must be about a year ago, things have not been as good.
Yeah, it's about being able to see through different lenses, isn't it? I think that's a really interesting subject, and you know, maybe we have that as a talk for later on, inclusion by design. I really like that. Anybody else got any thoughts? Andre, Kenya, Becky, Maddie, Sadia?
We can go back to the slides if not, and then we can end in a sort of what can we do as you know, as advocates and leaders, and how can we bring our neurodiversity skills to leadership.
Okay, fine. So we're moving on to the next slide.
Yeah, so the next slide is it's kind of looking beyond diversity inclusion, equality, and it's looking at these things. So as advocates and leaders, it's just I thought I'd ask the question, can we encourage a team culture where people feel that they're empowered? And in some ways it helps to think about what the opposite is like. I don't want us today, we haven't got time, but I also don't want us to be thinking back. I'm sure that we've all got traumatic, horrible experiences in the past, and I think there is the negative of how it feels like. I'm sure we all know how it feels like, but I was trying to look at the positives in bold here. So how can we make sure people feel empowered? They don't feel disempowered. How can we make sure that they have access to resources and services so they're not feeling shut out? How can they feel safe? And that means not feeling unsafe. And how can they experience a sense of belonging so that they're not alienated and that they can express themselves openly so they don't feel that they have to mask or hide, or that they're feeling judged, or that they're not up to the standard. So they're open questions. I definitely don't have the answers to these, but when we're a leader, can we be thinking about these few things? And then I thought if it's all right, I'll just say a few words of sort of things that I'd read about of what we can do in leadership and allyship, but then we can go back to the open discussion. So I was looking at what it is to be an ally and then what it is to be a leader, and it felt like some of these things are quite similar. So one thing is to be effective and not just performative. So you're actually there not just to talk about change, but to take action and to lead the culture and the values that you want to see. But to do that, you need to educate yourself. But you need to think carefully when you're asking other people to share their experiences. Make sure that it's comfortable and it doesn't have an emotional or a psychological or a physical burden on those people to educate you. Listen, so making sure that you're really open to accepting feedback and that you're admitting that you definitely don't know anything yourself. So also accept that you're going to get it wrong. So a lot of times with this topic, people can be scared to talk openly about it. They're worried about using the wrong words or offending people. And I think there's always a way to talk about this empowerment and access and safety, but in a way that isn't putting a burden on people. So be open to challenge and open to learn. There's a phrase, see something, say something, do something. So also you might be benefiting from a situation. Got to think about you might have your own privilege or your own better access than other people. But it's still important if you're seeing inequality or unfair behavior to really try and say something, because it might be easier if you're the person that spotted it for you to say it than to leave it to the person who's feeling excluded or unsafe. They might not be able to do anything themselves. And also make sure that you're thinking about sort of a fair exchange. So sometimes with diversity and inclusion, I mean, the example I use is people will often say, oh, you're dyslexic, why don't you write a blog about it? That'd be really great if you could write this news article about it. And at the beginning, I used to say yes a lot, and then I'd be worrying for ages and not wanting to write it down. So it's also making sure that if you're trying to listen and learn from other people, you might be trying. You've talked about inclusion by design. To do that, you might want to get a group of users together and to ask other people for their experience. But yeah, you've got to make sure what's in it for those people that you're talking to, and that you're not just trying to take information from them but leave them with no benefits. So they were just my kind of concluding thoughts on this. But yeah, it's just open to the team now. Catherine, that's the end of the presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Jennifer. It was really good. And informative, and we've got the, you know, the added benefit of the fact that you are out there doing it.
Trying to do it and learning how to do it.
Your job. No, I think we all ought to congratulate
Yeah,
Jennifer.
it's lovely and clear.
It was really good, very clear, and your slides were good too. Thanks, thank you, Jennifer. I've got a question, and do you mind if I raise this? You talked about unfair behaviour and how it's our responsibility to raise awareness of whether there is a fairness happening or not, and that kind of links to whistleblowing. And it's a difficult one because it depends where you're positioned within the organisation and how much power yourself you have. I mean, I have to say that I had a very bad time when I was at a university because my line manager was totally inappropriate in his behaviour, and I had to call him out. I couldn't live with myself because if I didn't, I would have colluded. And I felt so badly about it. I actually had a one-to-one with him, and I hoped that it would be left there. And he was deeply revengeful towards me and hounded me in my job. So I just think that you know, it's really important to call people out or call organisations out, but it's a difficult one sometimes, and we have
And it can be dangerous and harmful to do so.
Really
Yeah.
dangerous. Yeah. You know, we just can only do our best, really.
I think that's something that I didn't say is, and I've heard other people say this in our previous groups as well. Sometimes it gets to a point that a culture and an environment is not for you because culture and values are so important, and the leadership has the power to dictate that if you can't change the dynamic, sometimes you do have to leave just to protect yourself, and it's really sad. And but I think you're right to acknowledge that you just can't change everything. Sometimes things are stacked against you.
And I think we're talking about toxic cultures,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, when Jennifer and I had a chat about this presentation, you know, and this is Jennifer's work, you know, I have a very small part in it, you know. We did talk about values, didn't we, Jennifer? And I said I think values are absolutely core to all of this. And you know, you're quite right to say that, you know, if you can't sign up to the values of this organisation and are not prepared to change, you're actually better off leaving. Don't know what other people feel. Andre?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that because I think you put yourself in a position that you're not comfortable with every day. So I think overall it's not good for your mental health either. So I think when it comes to that situation, you don't agree with, well, sometimes you have companies that have values, but they don't necessarily follow what their values are. And then I don't know, for me, I just feel like if the company isn't following the values, I don't respect the company. So for me, it's always been something I've had to get up and leave.
It gets really difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think sometimes when I wanted to say something about, you know, maybe somebody said something kind of racial slur or something like that, I think I found that I kind of wish that I knew right way to, not the right way, but I can't find the right words to say to people. I don't want to kind of be all angry about it, or I want to find the right words, and oftentimes I can't find the right words, so things unfortunately get left, don't get responded to, and then that will be kind of, you know, brewing away within me as a frustration. But I think it's good. I mean, you know, even if people are saying the wrong thing or whatever, it's good to kind of know how to challenge people in a way that will make them think and will make and kind of educate them, and just say things in the right way. But it's not something that I really am very good at yeah, I'm never really able to find the right words to say things when I need them.
I think that's all part of this whole leadership topic that we're grappling with now. You know, it's about how do you inform your own leadership style to be able to do that? You know, how do you educate yourself as a leader to be able to do that? Because there'll be other leaders above you, unless you're, you know, you're CEO of a blue chip company. And how, and it's mediation, it's diplomacy, isn't it? It's being able to attune yourself to other people. Becky, what do you think? You've joined us.
I have, yeah. I'm going to say I was walking before. That's why my camera was off. I got lost. I'm still in Leeds, just in the car. So apologies, I missed the beginning, but I did get to listen to the end. I do think everybody made a lot of valid points, and I completely agree. And I do think it's difficult when you're in them situations because you want to speak up, but it's often hard to. But then it plays on your mind. And I've done something this week because it's still been playing on my mind since I left the last company, and I couldn't get my access to work equipment, even though I kept messaging. And it's only because I'd got somebody who was good, who I know, who got me the access to, who said, don't worry about it, the company will pay for it for you, because I'm still waiting for the new version. And I thought, this isn't on, it's not right, and we need to make change. So on Saturday night at 12:30 at night, I wrote my local MP a letter, and I wrote it all out, and I explained that I'm part of this group as well, and I'm not the only one who's had these issues. And I feel that I actually I asked for his advice and said I feel we need to change the law or the policy to make it that companies, it isn't a choice that they choose whether they want to give you the access to work, the equipment that the taxpayer, I put that as well, the taxpayer us have paid for. It shouldn't be them that choose whether they want to give us the access, what we've already got from access to work. They are obliged to give us the code for Dragon and the various other softwares, and they should be forced to do it. So he's responded back to me. I've already had a reply back saying he's contacted the Department for Work and Pensions and Work, or whatever it's called, and he will let me know their response. So I've responded back again just to help him along. And I've said, well, I appreciate the response, and I do feel in this time, particularly when we are wanting to look after the money and money needs to be spent on other things, why are we paying multiple times for the same people to have the same access when large organisations, like the one I work for, are basically getting the money from the government to do the contracts and getting large bonuses, and then not giving the software? So basically the taxpayer is paying multiple times. So I've helped him along by prompting him with various different things, and I feel that them sort of changes, if we can make them happen, I will give everybody an update when he responds again. But that's the sort of thing, because it plays on your mind, because I've left the company 2 months ago, but I'm still really annoyed that I didn't get my software, even though I've got it from the new company. They shouldn't be allowed, companies shouldn't be allowed to withhold information when they're advertising themselves as a leader in inclusion and neurodiverse and stuff, and they've sponsored events to say how good they are. And that's my issue. So many companies, and then I will stop, I promise, so many companies promote the fact that they are inclusive, we do a lot, they'll sponsor events, but then they're not looking after the people, and it's the people that really matter. That's it. Sorry, I'll stop now.
I think that's really good.
Let's just open this up to the rest of the advocates, because
I was going to say, I understand kind of Becky's frustration. I just realised I had my camera off because I was fiddling with a pen, but to write a few notes. But just to respond to you, I fully understand where you're coming from, Becky. There is a major problem with access to work. So my old autism mentor, Mandy Jane Lace, runs a company who specialises in access to work. So if you go on to inclusion.gg, which I'll put in the chat, she has raised a number of issues. And I think the biggest barrier with access to work is actually getting the approval. When I got this desk last year, and my chair and the software was quite quick once I got the approval. The backlog with access to work is beyond a joke. And I do agree with you that if you need it, it should be made, legislation. But also in terms of general inclusion, I don't really think it's fair that like, for example, when I was made a manager at Goldsmiths College, and I still get annoyed with them every now and again because I see students from there, and being told that I needed to see a mentor because there's a culture. They create, they say they're for the creative industry and they're for neurodiversity, but they're not. They have sweet FA knowledge. I'm not going to swear, but I do feel like it because they did not have any understanding of Asperger's syndrome or dyslexia, to be honest, for employees. But I do think in terms of intersectionality, people need to be themselves. And, I used to lead the LGBT group at BPP, and I used to make sure there was events about dyslexia, about mental health, and it's something that I kind of miss when, things were in person. But I do also think that in terms of a leader is something, someone that you aspire to and who is able to be balanced. And sometimes people may have a lot of knowledge, but in terms of being able to apply the knowledge and be able to collaborate in a way and actually empathize with each individual and see people as people, which is why when you're in a smaller team, the balance can actually be better. But it's just something that some people can talk the talk, but they can't actually do it. And I think there is more EDI knowledge
Which I think
needed
is,
in
I think
some.
is what Jennifer was saying earlier. It's
Yeah,
about you say it and then you need to do it,
yeah,
which I think is what Becky's demonstrating.
yeah,
She's doing it.
yeah.
And what, when Becky was talking, I was thinking, well, actually being a leader is also about being an influencer, isn't it?
And also being able to relate to people. And I really enjoy doing the staff training. So when we get new people join, kind of, how are you doing? I have a chat with them. So you're going to see me observe with a student and then ask people. And I like the fact we have like this chat on Click and we all kind of help each other rather than feeling isolated. Because when you're remote and you're feeling, what can you do? You have that banter. It's a way of trying to replicate when people are far away. And then when people kind of get to know you, then you can form friendships, and that again can lead to, feeling included. So yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. We're nearing the end. We've got another 10 minutes if we want that 10 minutes. Has anybody got any reflections on Jennifer's talk at all? Anybody who might want to speak who has not spoken yet? I'm not quite sure about Maddie. I kind of feel she's an AI person. Maddie, are you there with us? Or you switched on AI? Yes, she switched on AI. Okay.
No, I am here.
Oh, you are, right.
Oh yeah. I was driving home from work, so unfortunately I have to put it on so I can catch things, but I am home now, so yes, I am here.
Have you got any thoughts, any reflections on the session today? Given that you are in the workplace and you've had quite a lot of, I know we've had conversations about your workplace and values in the workplace.
It's a very interesting subject at this time because at work we are talking about this because there's a few issues that I have with my manager of him understanding me that he's not very good at that. So no, this has been quite an interesting evening actually for me and what people have said because I've experienced quite different things at this time, and at work I've been quite stressed, and unfortunately I'm so stressed I gave myself an eye infection. So I realised I need to take a bit more care of myself and stuff, and actually talk to my manager a bit more about what I need that I haven't done really.
What do you need, Maddie?
It's just about I'm a person that likes to have things in writing, organized, and organized in writing and stuff like that. But he likes to just tell people. But what he does, he tells one person one thing, tells someone something else, and then we all come together and get confused. And a lot of us are I can't say it for the diverse people. Do you know what I mean? All of us are in the room. Yeah. So someone's got ADHD, and someone else like me, I'm dyslexic. Another person is I I can't pronounce it, but we've all got these things, but we can understand each other, communicate, and we work really well, but he can't really work with us and communicate well. If that makes sense a little bit.
Do you think he could be one of us as well?
I think he could be, because he's very erratic sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And we're like, what's he do? You know, like, but
why don't you have a conversation where you all get together and you explain who you are to him?
yeah, I think that's what we talked about actually today. Coincidentally enough, one of these, you know, that we all actually think we're going to do that, have a meeting and kind of all sit down together.
Yeah, in a very non-confrontational way. We just say, look, we need to just explain who we are to you.
Yeah, basically, and just introducing what works for us. That's what we kind of need to do. Then I think he would understand and find out what works better for him, because we don't know what works for him very well, you know.
Yeah.
So everyone's getting frustrated and angry with him about it. But no one's really had discussion with him.
Well, I mean, yes, it's about reaching out to him and saying, you know, we obviously want to help you manage it in the best way possible. Can you just talk to us about what's best for you? And we can talk to you about what's best for us, and we can come to some sort of middle ground.
Yeah. That is what we discussed that we're going to do. And thank you so much for the advice, because I think that's going to be our forward moving.
Is he open to it?
He will. Yeah, he is open to it, I think now. Yeah, because a lot of us have come to him individually and talked to him, and then I think now he's come together and realised actually it's probably he didn't know there were so many, and I didn't know, because we all started talking and went, actually I didn't know, you know. So it's very interesting. We need to talk more, I think, communication in some companies that we don't do, you know. So yeah.
You know, and that's, you know, I think we are going to cover communication, I think with Kenya actually at the next training session, because, you know, people are talking about listening. Listening is as important as speaking. We are nearing the end. Sadia, Kenya, do you want to say anything?
No, I'm a bit stressed at the moment with the dog outside, keeps barking, trying to get in, and I'm alone with it. It's my first time living with a dog so close.
Right, have you got the door locked?
Yeah, I'm in the kitchen. I've locked the door. The owner's gone out, so I'm just left. I can't go to bed.
How big a dog is it? How big a dog? Let's talk about this when we've finished with the others, Kenya.
Yeah.
You can talk to me.
Yeah.
Sadia, do you want to say anything?
Just thank you to yourself and Jenny for the a good talk. Very, very knowledge, a lot of knowledge shared there. And sorry, I'm a bit tired actually. I'm exhausted because I've just come. A 45-minute took me 2 hours. 45-minute journey just took me 2 hours. I was stuck on the A12. So I only just got home.
Remember, this is recorded. This training session is recorded.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. I'm just processing it all. I mean, it's all very valuable. My workplace have a EDI strategy in place, which it's a 5-year plan, and most of the focus is on race actually, because of especially following Black Lives Matter and everything that came out of that. But saying that, they are also focusing elsewhere as well, even though the majority of the focus isn't there. And I'm there trying to do my bit, just trying to raise awareness about disability, hidden disabilities in particular, neurodiversity. And one of the interesting things that came out of a meeting today was the low level of disclosure rate amongst people who have disabilities. And I asked the HR person, I said, is there any way that you monitor this trend, and how does disclosure come about? And they said they didn't have anything like that in place. So it's a tricky one when it comes to disclosure. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to say anything for fear of stigma and not being hired. So it's something that the organization hopefully is working on.
Thank you very much, Sadia. You're obviously doing, you know, a lot there. Right, we're coming back to Jennifer. Jennifer, have you got any last words? Everybody's super congratulated you in the chat and in the meeting. Last words.
I'll just recap and say, can you help people feel empowered, have access, feel safe, feel like they belong and that they can express themselves? I think doing this talk made me think they're my values. Everyone will have different ones, but they seem really important. So thank you, because I've learnt loads just from being in this group.